When the great wind came and the electricity went out and the tree fell on the house and bats poured from the tree and entered the house while the child bathed, the transformation had already begun. What the mother had neglected to say was that the bat had brought clairvoyance, and that she saw in an instant what she had not been able to see before, all that had happened, and now all that was to come. So this was the originating event. A huge tree fell on my house, and only the next day did I understand that there were bats in the trunk and that they had been there all night, and because it was dark, anyway, this spun me into a whole other place, as you might imagine. And the book, The Bay of Angels, which I've been working on forever, had to be put aside because these things kept occurring to me after that. And there was no way to make them stop coming. So I would write these stories of my life with my daughter, fictive but not, in the Hudson Valley where we were living. So it was the world, but it was a world transfigured and a world transformed. Again, I'll talk about the wind here for a minute and then move on to some of these small independent sections. The great wind came, and the maple tree that had stood near the house for 200 years split in half, and from its center poured a torrent of bats. Inside, the child was stepping from her bath, and the mother swaddled her in a towel. Night was all around them. The child thought she could feel the wind moving through her, and the places where her wings were beginning to come through. Soon it would be the time of the transformation, the mother said. The child said she was almost ready, but she was not ready yet. So they go about their life and their days. Here's a section. The child sits high up and looks at herself in the mirror. There is something unnerving about a child dangling in the air while a hand bearing silver airborne scissors glides by. She is having her first haircut. The mother watches as the curls fall in slow motion to the floor. So many things are always falling. The tables fell through the floor, but that is another story. The mother and the child missed already the falling hair and all the feelings they had no names for. In the valley, the Palantines dreamt of building boats, but the boats would not float, so they turned to coffin making, but lost heart after a while and decided to try their hand at tables. The Palantines loved tables as all men love tables. They loved tables as women love linens. Tables were a place to plan a strategy, arm wrestle, or drink a stout. But something was wrong with the tables. The tables were too heavy to lift, and they had a habit of falling through the floor like boats of stone. With coffins, it did not matter how far they fell into the earth. In fact, the farther a coffin fell into the earth, the better. This way, they could layer the dead, and the dead would not be quite so lonely or sad. Galileo tells us that the tables fall at the same rate as the child's hair. The deeper the coffin sank, the more pleased everyone was with the arrangement. Sitting high up in that little executioner's chair, the scissors and the child gleam. Some men, but not all, revere war. The dead in the valley lay in layers. The mother gathered the child's hair and placed it in a glassine envelope. There it will quietly lie through the years of peace and through the years of war. How many years would tresses fall, falling on human time? The mother bends to the ground and collects the hair of the young men who will not come home again. The child's hair fell a long way to the floor that day. So you see, even simple haircuts became dangerous on some level. Snow falls, and the roots call to the mother, and the sleeping small-clawed animals in their burrows and tunnels, and the winter vegetables that lie peacefully untouched under the earth. When she walks on the earth's crust, she grows drowsy now, feeling their sleep. Magnified, so many sleeping creatures multiplied, she can barely lift a foot now. What is wrong, the child says, and lies on the ground on her back and helps the mother lift her feet, one boot at a time. The child has read that beneath the city of Paris there is another city. There you can find a home for abandoned children. I should like to see where the animals sleep in winter, says the child, watching her mother's eyes slowly begin to close. Compelled into the dark forest after midnight, the mother, in a brown suede coat, went out in search of a buck in order to mate. In her mind, it had seemed that she had ventured far into the night, driven by desire, deep into the heart of the forest, though in reality, but a few moments had passed before she was shot dead through the heart. That night, long ago, the hunters ran to find their prize, but when they realized their mistake, they were sore afraid. What was a woman with a brown suede coat and hooves doing out in the forest during the rut, they wondered, and horrified, they covered her body with leaves and fled. Meanwhile, the deliriously hallucinating mother sees the enormous buck in the wood, and she calls to it with lust's strange call. The planet is suspended in darkness, and there is violence and mystery at the heart of existence. Sexual Congress provides wild new life, a life impervious to bullets or harm, and the mother gets up at last, and brushing off the dry leaves and moss and twigs, she makes her way home, where the child, sitting at the window, waits. The men who had covered her steaming body with leaves had fled the scene utterly, but their fleeing stayed in them, and many times they returned to the place where nothing was left but a light brown suede coat. There were no other earthly remains, not hair, not bones, not hooves, and for the rest of eternity, the woman stalked the men and haunted them. I don't know what half of these mean at all, but I've left them there. You know, I've tried to leave them in that place. I'll read maybe one more before I go to the Bay of Angels. The casket holding the harp was lowered slowly now into the silence. It had been laid out on a smooth white satin pillow, and the people in the valley shuffled past it and mourned the end of music. Precisely a week after they watched the harp, all that was left of the man, lowered into the earth in a box, the small, sad entourage traipsed across the field to witness the unveiling of the new fire truck. It was noon and 12 bells sounded and the chicken was cooked on the grill and the living went about the things the living do. Wise Jean pointed to the new fire engine that lay covered under a black tarp, a large and jarring shape on the landscape, and the mother balanced a small flame quietly and waited. At last something was said over the loudspeaker. The people drew close and the great shroud was lifted with a drum roll. There it was before them, red, shiny, bright, several stories high. Everyone gasped. It was a wondrous sight. Its tires the size of a human child, its body impervious and strong. For a long time, no one moved. Then, all of a sudden, the children ran to embrace it as best they could. They rubbed their hands along its smooth, gleaming surfaces. The chief rang the bell, and the truck, although stationary, seemed already in motion. "How much we miss you," she thought she heard someone call out to the new fire truck, and the women wept. "How strong you are and how brave." The truck, she understood, was an obvious stand-in for the man. Something inside the mother was burning. Today, there was no way around it. She wondered if you dug a hole to the perfect center of the earth, whether it would be possible to float. That one I really... The other thing that haunts this book, and that came up when the tree and the bats and all the rest happened, was that I was in New York City when the World Trade Towers fell. And for a long time after that, I had this uncanny feeling of being unsure whether or not I had been inside. I felt a figment of myself in some way. And so that's part of what is informing this writing and is directly addressed in this text as well. But, so, okay. Let me take a... So Nate told you I've been working on this book, The Bay of Angels, for at least 15 years or so. This is, I think, the opening of it, and I'm not sure because of time how far I'm going to get. You can give me some sort of a signal. But it is. It's. I mean, this is the book. All my other books, I feel, have been the apprenticeship for sure. It because it involves everything I've learned over the past 100 years about writing in my last 10 books. And so it includes fiction, it includes essay, it includes memoir, all the things I've worked with in different ways. It includes the use of graphics, which I used, worked through very seriously in a book of mine called The Art Lover. It includes all kinds of things that I've been sort of working with for a very long time. It's a very big thing, and this is just the opening, and it seems that it is, it opens on the day that we began our 1993 war with Iraq. So that's sort of where this starts. And it's an aspect of myself. It's not fictionalized, really. For A is the beginning of learning and the door to heaven. Christopher Smart. One of the things I loved most when I was a child was to read from the Children's Encyclopedia. The Ice Age, the oboe, the migration of birds, the origin of oceans, and hours would pass in an instant as time warped and warbled and space seemed to expand into an oval, elongating shape, and I would vanish into those pages. Often I would find myself lost in the many wonders of the world then, an abacus, an